Budget amendment idea with our panelists coming up later in the program. As we said, the Boehner bill passed by a narrow margin, 218 to 210, and only after the Speaker spent the day rounding up support from enough Tea Party conservatives. Zakaria, host of GPS and editor-at-large at Time magazine, joins us now on the telephone. Fareed, you say that the Tea Party is anti-democratic at this point, and you talk about the polarization that is occurring. How can you say, how do you mean that they're anti-democratic?
Well, Anderson, if you think about what's going on, the Tea Party is trying to pass a particular agenda, which is basically a balanced budget or this all-cuts budget. It cannot get it through the Congress of the United States. It cannot get it through the political democratic process that we have, which is that Congress passes something and the president must sign it. That's the normal workings of democracy. So instead of accepting some compromise that can get through the democratic process, what they're saying is, we'll blow up the country if you don't listen to us. We'll hold hostage the credit of the United States, the good standing of the United States, and we'll blow it up. Now, that is why even Charles Krauthammer, columnist for the Washington Post, a fire-breathing conservative, urged today in his column in the Washington Post not to go down this path because he called it counter-constitutional. In other words, they are not acting in the way that constitutional democracy expects you to act. You are meant to respect the democratic process. You try your best to convince to get a majority in the House, a majority in the Senate, and the president to sign it. But if you control just one of those three branches of government, you can't hijack the entire system and say, I'm going to blow the country up unless you listen to me.
Well, Fareed, they're saying, though,
that only won one election to one House once.
They're saying they're not holding anybody hostage. They're saying, look, this is what we said we would do to get elected. We've been elected. This is what people elected us to do.
Well, unfortunately, as I say, I think they don't understand the workings of democracy. They have not been elected as dictators of the United States. They have been elected to one House in one branch of the American government. The only way you can translate your wishes into public policy in America is if you can convince your branch and the other one, the Senate and the White House, to go along with it. And if you can't, you've got to figure out amongst yourself what you can agree on. This is why it is fundamentally anti-democratic, counter-constitutional, in the words of Charles Krauthammer, to be trying to do this. And it is, it's just an extraordinary act of hostage-taking on the part of the Tea Party. It is holding the country hostage, and it has already damaged the good standing of the United States. Our debts, it's very important to understand this. The Tea Party talks a lot about morality. In a capitalist framework, the obligation you owe in terms of repaying your debts is a moral obligation. When the Visa bill comes, you can't decide that the stuff you bought is stuff you don't want. You pay the bill. Then you can have an interesting conversation about how to reform your spending. But you can't renege on your debts.
What do you think is going to happen now?
It seems very difficult to see how the kind of people you were talking to, Anderson, are going to accept some kind of compromise. It seems to me you have to accept that 300 million people in this country, not all of them agree with you, and so you make your best case, you take as much as you can. They had a deal. John Boehner provided a deal with $3 trillion of spending cuts for $1 trillion in revenue enhancements, all of it through closing tax loopholes, none of it through raising rates. Now, if that's not acceptable, I really don't know where you go. I mean, my sense is I hope that President Obama is seriously exploring the possibility of invoking the 14th Amendment.
Really?
Says that the validity of the
that's a valid option.
Will not be questioned, and saying that he has the legal authority to simply raise the debt ceiling himself. I think that President Bill Clinton thinks that it is a viable argument. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I think we have reached a level of dysfunction here that this is a kind of national emergency, almost like a war. And if the president were to invoke that, and if it were to go to the Supreme Court, I have a feeling the court would, as it does with war powers issues, say, this is a political issue, we're not going to get involved, and the president's writ would stand.
And Fareed, to the Republicans who say, well, look, this August 2nd is not really going to be the cataclysm that people talk about.
Look, it may not be August 2nd, it may be August 4th. Nobody doubts that we're running out of money. Nobody doubts that we have to borrow more money, whether it's August 2nd or 5th, or whether you can go through some legerdemain. Is this how the greatest economy in the world should be run? that we should be saying, well, we can first pay we'll take the first 20 cents out of every dollar and pay the debt, but we won't pay the veterans, and we won't. And if you listen to what the congressman said to you, Anderson, he says, I don't want any tax increases, no closing of loopholes. I want to pay the interest on the debt. I want to look after our seniors, that's Medicare, Social Security, and then I want to look after the Army. Well, I've got news for you, Congressman. There ain't much money left. If you're not willing to cut any of those things and you're not willing to raise tax revenues, then you're going to have to rely on magic to somehow balance the budget. That's all the big money. That's where it is. It's not in some mythical waste, fraud, and abuse. The bulk of the money is in Social Security, Medicare, the military, interest on the debt. You can abolish the space shuttle program in the Department of Education, and that's going to get you 4 days worth of money.
Fareed Zakaria, Fareed, appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thanks.